Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here today. We want to welcome you here. We're at HR Tech Connect Summit, and we're having an awesome session ready for you this morning. We got Ben Eubanks that's going to be hosting an awesome panel with Melissa and Teresa and Terry. And listen, this session on Mythbusting AI and HR, real use cases, measurable ROIs, you're going to want to share this. And so I'm going to ask you right now as you're joining in, share the live stream, whether you're on YouTube or you're on LinkedIn right now. Please share that live stream. And listen, I'm excited. Usually I have my best friend Ben here with me, and we're together. But today I'm sitting with you live here in Jacksonville, Florida. And I want to challenge everybody. When we think about AI in HR, and what does that truly mean? Some things that I am looking forward to get out of this conversation is that I believe that there are some things that we can authentically get from this. There's a lot of time that we can save. And so we're going to learn a lot about those things and what it means to truly have authentic relationships because of the time that we're saving, because of what AI can bring to a business and to your department. So I'm excited about everything that this provides. And so when you get in today, share your location, chime in. I know a lot of you, I know from HR Summer School, so I'm excited about that. If I do not know you, my name is George Rogers. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia area, and I'm excited to be with y'all here today and really sit with you through this conversation. And so when you hear something that you love, or there's something that you want to chime in on, feel free to chat. As a matter of fact, Ben is going to be giving away a couple copies of his book. He's going to sign a copy of his book and send out to a few of you. And so if you have questions as well, at the end of the session, the panel is going to be able to take questions from you, the audience here out there. And so be ready, chime in, put some questions down, comment. Let's have a conversation within this community as we come together and really join there. And so I believe we are ready to go live here in a second. So we're going to chime in and we're going to switch it over to Ben. And so be ready for us, be excited, and let's see what they have for us as we go live here in Jacksonville, Florida. Once again, we're here at HR Tech Connect Summit. Ben Eubanks, Melissa, and Terry, and Teresa are going to be here with us this morning, and they're ready for us right now. And so we're going to go live as they get there here at the summit.
Based on the research I've done, based on the conversations I'm having with companies using these tools, that's not the case at all. And so I wanted each of you here to represent different disciplines, different areas of things that HR cares about, to talk about some of those things and dive into it. So before we get into the fun stuff, really quickly, a round of introductions. Teresa, would you be willing to go first?
Sure, certainly. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. Teresa Smith, and I'm the Senior Managing Partner at UKG, and been in the industry for a little over 22 years. Prior to that, I worked in the IT industry. So you know, my favorite thing is marrying the people side of the business with technology.
Awesome.
So thank you.
That's a big good fit for today. Terry.
Thanks again for having me as well. Terry Bustamante, Sales Director with DaXtra Technologies. Been in the industry for 20 years now. Got my start in the staffing side of the house, and since have worked for global digital marketing companies and have been selling technology back into corporate HR departments and staffing firms.
Awesome. Yes. Glad to have you, Terry.
Thank you.
And Melissa.
And thanks, Ben. Melissa Swisher. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of Socrates.ai. And by way of background, I've been in the HR benefits and IT technology space for the last 20 plus years as well.
Oh, we reached the plus years.
We did,
okay.
but
Okay.
that's why I have to cut it with the 20 plus.
We crossed that threshold. Okay, I'm with you on that. All right. Awesome. So just an opening question, just an opening salvo to get us all kind of warmed up a little bit. I want to ask you the question, what do you think is the best advantage or opportunity that AI gives us when it comes to HR? Right? Not self-driving cars, not all this other stuff in the world. In the space that we live and work in, starting with you, Teresa, what's the best benefit?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits of AI in the HR world is around really understanding what's happening with our people, right? To make strategic plans, to move the business forward, and really to come up with new ideas and creative ways of introducing new concepts into the HR field.
I like that. Awesome. How about you, sir?
Yes, I would say, you know, it's time to, I think, jump on board with automation, to not be intimidated by it, right? I feel like a lot of these menial tasks that recruiters are bogged down with, it's time to start automating that so that the recruiter can actually do what they enjoy, and that's engaging with people.
So I like that one.
Yeah.
Melissa.
And for me, I think it's everything that HR represents is about the human aspect. And I think what AI with the automation piece allows that to do is really to get people to focus back on that human experience, but using AI to deliver those meaningful experiences in a way that touches their heart as well, I think is equally as important.
That sounds like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
To say we're using these tools, this technology to touch someone's heart, right?
That's
Use the
right.
phrase. But I believe we can do that. We can create these better relationships. The best HR leaders that I know, some in this room, right? The focus is, it's not just we love people, but how do we serve the people really well through the different things that we get to do? And so all those answers are great, from helping them find the right job for them, to connecting with them through those tough times, or the opportunities to support them, to let's figure out what the world they're thinking and what they need from us so we can really serve them. I had a chance recently to talk to the head of analytics for Aramark, People Analytics, and he was telling me that one of the things that he has been encouraging his staff, his team, because there are people on that team that are worried about AI, they're scared about it, they're thinking automation's this fearful thing. And he said, we can do two things. We can lean into it, we can learn about it, we can embrace it and figure out, is it going to change my job? How will it change my job? Asking those questions. Or we can just turn our back to it and someone else is going to pass us by. And that's not a place where any of us want to be. But you don't consciously make the choice like, yes, I'm planning on taking a back seat and letting someone else, control things. But when you turn your back to it, that's what you're doing, essentially. Okay, so I've set up a specific question for each of you. And by the way, I see we're live on for the rest of the world out there. So hey there, we're glad to have you. Teresa, I've set up a separate question for each of you, but you're all welcome to chime in, comments, disagree with her. Like, let's have a battle here. That's fine with me. Around each of your areas of expertise. So the first one I want to throw at you is, one of the things that companies are struggling with right now is really understanding not just what their employees are, what's going on with them, but how they're feeling, how they're thinking, what maybe unspoken thoughts, honestly. Talk about how you are serving customers in that way and why that's so important right now.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's really important right now because obviously the world has changed, right? And our people have changed, our businesses have changed, and the way we serve our customers, more importantly, has changed. And I think that, there's a lot of stress that's happening with our people that we may not even know about. And as they're working in their day-to-day, we really need to tap into not only what's important to them and what they value the most, but how are they feeling about what's happening in the environments around them. And, I agree with you 100%. I think it's time that we can, or an opportunity that we can really change the lives of our people inside the work environment and potentially even outside of the work environment. And understanding this human insight, right, what's really going on with our people can help us to better prepare for the future. It can give us insight on areas where we may need to make some changes with our management team, right? Because they're the ones that are leading it. But if we don't understand really how our employees are feeling, it's really hard to make decisions to move forward. And the other piece of this is not only understanding how they're feeling, but we've got to take action on that, right? We can gather all this data. You could have a pile and stacks of information sitting on your desk, but if you're not doing anything about it, it's not adding any value to the organization.
I think you've seen my desk at some point recently. I have the piling system, not the filing system. But I love the idea of, let's really get into the root of how people feel, what's going on with them, what they're talking about, whether it's, again, spoken or unspoken. We might pick up on their emotions, even if they're just saying, I don't know how to express this, but man, this is hard. And to understand that, because we saw from some of the stats this week that burnout's at an all-time high, stress, and all those other things. And I know that Melissa and I had been chatting the other day about some of those moments where we have a chance to impact someone at critical times, right? So this gives a chance to do that. In addition, Terry, the way I put hiring, because people think about this transactional thing, I say, I'm asking you to commit a portion of your life to this company, right? And so it's a big decision. So supporting them in those kinds of things is really powerful. Sorry, I jumped in there because I was so excited. Anybody else want to comment, want to share?
I would just say, to piggyback off of that, I think when you're looking at your internal staff, a lot of the conversations that I've been having with folks is, let's look at our internal talent pool, right? Our current employees. I think the stats are coming out. It's like 1 in every 4 or 1 in every 5 people is currently at your organization looking for another opportunity today. So let's look at the individuals that potentially could be promoted into other opportunities. We're going, skill-based recruiting is hot right now. So let's look at our internal staff and promote those folks. And then the other recs are going to be a little bit easier to fill as well.
I was just going to say, and I think just from a flexibility point of view, right? Getting to the place where we can offer more flexibility from a working work lifestyle today, right? With people juggling so much from, young kids and older parents and everybody reassessing their priorities in terms of, what this has meant and how it shifts things for them. So thinking about it a little bit differently from an organization to say, can we be more flexible to accommodate some of the employees' needs and demands and put ourselves in a better position for retention and acquisition of talent?
And see, all the things that y'all individually talked about, y'all can tell I'm from, right, south here. The things that y'all mentioned there, like the tools can do certain things, but they're not stepping in and retaining those people. They're not stepping in and making those changes. They're not stepping in and coaching someone when they had a tough day. They're not doing those things for them. So that allows us to pinpoint our efforts and really spend our time where it's most valuable, which again, the great HR leaders that I know, the great recruiters that I know, they spend those times building those relationships. All right. So Melissa, I want to ask you, employee experience today is primarily digital, right? For a lot of people, especially with remote employees, the experience, the interaction with the company is all happening in a virtual setting or through some piece of technology. How does AI fit into that picture? Because when people say employee experience, it feels this wide.
Yeah.
Talk about how AI fits into that bigger picture.
So I think it's really 2 parts, right? So from an experience point of view, there's things that make things more efficient and simple for you as an employee, and the ability to get things done and removing those friction points of the organization and those frustration points, right? So things that when you're looking for it at that time when it really matters to you as an employee and you can't find it, that bogs you down, right? And that frustrates you. And, alongside with having a very busy day, it's one of those things that we can say, okay, where AI can help from that point of view is simplification, right? And automation. The second part, though, is something that's a high impact moment, right? Which are the things that, as a person's going through being a first-time parent and having a baby and not knowing at all how their life is about to change. I have a guy on my team who's about to have a baby and his life will totally change, right? So, but being there and being celebratory of that moment versus thinking as a manager or a leader to say, uh-oh, how am I going to replace this person while they're out on paternity and maternity leave and things like that. And being super excited and having an opportunity to touch their heart, right, with some video content or making them feel good and cross-promote those opportunities. We've done this in our consumer lives of making things on both fronts, right? We have meaningful experiences. I just took my kids to the immersive experience, the Van Gogh thing with which was super cool. And that's a meaningful experience. And then there's the things of convenience with Amazon, right? Order something, it's there the next day, versus the time. And so from an enterprise point of view, like in the 8-bit Christmas movie, for anybody who's seen it, one of the things the kid gets as a gift is encyclopedias, right? That's how the world used to be. But now look at where we find things. And it's the same thing from a work environment, simplicity and experiences.
I'd love to know, I don't have this data, but now I want to ask the question of an audience. How many if I guess in the room, how many of you would say that the employees at your company are experts at navigating all the policies, all the rules, all the resources you have, right? Probably nobody, I would argue. We know the language, we're embedded in that, but the employees, it's a foreign language to them, essentially. You're like, hey, I need this help. You're like, oh, you need policy form 00724. Like, what is that? We know all the things, but for them, it's a different experience. So delivering that back to them in a way that shows we understand what you need and we hear you, we appreciate you, right? We're giving you in that moment. So I love the baby example too, by the way. Yeah. He has no clue what's coming.
He doesn't.
Okay. So Terry, hiring and AI, we've heard some of it this week already. It's one of those areas where people are honestly fearful, right? Bias is the biggest question. People are worried about what this is going to mean for us. How are we going to how we're going to avoid some of those negative side effects that are always associated with AI in the headlines. And so I'd love to ask you, are there ways we can embed AI into how we're hiring people without using it in a way that's going to negatively harm certain populations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with AI, like we provide, it's natural language processing. So I feel like the technology looks at the context of job titles, skills. It looks at how that's built into the different resumes and so forth. So, excuse me. But yeah, so it looks at the context of how things are written in a resume, and it will. Oh gosh, guys.
You're okay. Hey, it looks at the resume. It'll look at like how that matches up against the job posting, right?
Yeah. So it's contextual based searching. So we're looking at the matching of jobs to candidates, candidates to jobs, candidates to candidates. So you can, guys, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You're trying to match those things up, though.
Yeah.
We talked about this the other day for a little bit. You're trying to match those things up in a way that doesn't look at someone's sorority they were in, right? It doesn't look at what zip code they're from.
Yep. So what we're doing now for like DEI and just like the diversity piece is making sure that we're anonymizing, names, contact information, companies, dates of employment, maybe previous universities, hobbies and interests, so that there's no bias in that hiring process. So we're going to anonymize those resumes and make it easier for those recruiters to make those decisions.
I love when I speak on AI, the first thing that comes up, doesn't matter what audience it is, someone has read an article or heard a story, like bias is the thing, like they're always worried about those things. But like in hiring is the place where it's probably most worrisome. We've got to be very vigilant about it. But other areas, right? The AI that Melissa was talking about a minute ago, like that says we don't care who you are. We're going to serve you well, whatever your situation might be, right? And same with Teresa. It's we see you as an individual. It actually gets us past some of those things. We might assume things about someone, and it lets us see past that and really dive into how they feel.
And then I would say, there's bias in our own decisions that we're making, right? If you think about it, if I'm a manager and I have a feeling that somebody is having problems or I'm trying to resolve some of their conflict, I may take my personal emotions into that, where AI takes it to a whole nother level, right? AI looks at it on a consistent basis. It looks at it over a period of time to find out what the trends are with perhaps an individual or an entire department or the company overall. So it takes my human opinion, right, or my assumptions out of it and allows it to look at behavior patterns that happen over a period of time, both positive and negative, right, so that organizations can make some decisions.
Well, the positive piece too, that gets me because we don't think about the positive bias piece, but again, Terry, you've been in the recruiting space for a long time.
Yeah.
How common is it to say, oh, look, I see that resume that we went to the same school. Let's have a conversation. That's not I'm not negatively attempting to negatively impact somebody, but I am by leaning into they're similar to me. Let's have a conversation, and we're going to be generally more likable because we have a point of connection before we ever show up together. That's not a negative intent, but that still is bias.
Yes, absolutely.
And you can think about the bias from another point of view of it being, there could be no bias when you have an AI experience. So for instance, when somebody's going through, let's say, a mental health crisis, or they suffer from anxiety, they might feel judged by having that conversation, even though the person has every intent not to judge them. And using technology in a way to say, I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling with anxiety. And then how cool would it be for an employee for a video to pop up of some senior leader say, hey, here's the program I used at Spring Health or whatever mental health application that could really help me. And, here's how we want to help you. And that personal experience and that person not being judged can have a huge impact when they're kind of trying to take that leap and to be more honest and forthright of what they're experiencing.
So the benefit of that is not having a human right there that you might feel, again, my office was always central located when I worked in HR. So if someone came to talk to me about anything, everybody's like, hey, what was what was Josh in here about? Or what was Sam in here about? Like they knew that someone had come to see me, even if it was, we're talking about kids or family or sports or whatever else, they saw him come. So especially in those cases, what we keep hearing from employers, like people don't, in some cases it's better to be virtual because you don't have that. But then like, I'm disconnected. I'm not going to just reach out to someone and ask for help. So having a different way to ask that without feeling like judgment, without feeling like someone, you might get a better response from someone, a more honest response from someone, so you can actually serve them better. So if they're holding something back, you won't know exactly how to support them.
That's right. Yep.
One other thing, I wanted to go back to you. I told you the other day that I did this fun experiment a while back around this, and we found that when we're doing surveys on our employees, asking them how they're feeling, asking them what's going on with them, asking what their challenges and priorities are, when I, as the HR leader, come in there to start looking at that data, to start analyzing that data, I actually have a bias too. If my manager is a jerk, every time I see him, oh, look, they hate their manager too, they hate their manager, I'm gonna start looking for those things that are similar to how I feel about the world, how I perceive things. And so even that, again, it's a bias in how we're perceiving that stuff. So having the AI in there allows us to avoid those kinds of perceptions as well.
Absolutely. And, we got to layer in also the generations. If you think about it, right? You want to talk about bias.
Yes.
We form this opinion of each generation and what they look like. So AI can help to eliminate some of that, right? So that we're looking at the organization holistically, versus just having this opinion that because you fit into this generation, this is what your challenges are, or this is where you're going to be lacking in a certain area. So it really does, like you said, take out that bias for sure.
One of my favorite web comments years ago was a workplace one, and it's not out anymore, but it's a picture of a person standing in front of their own leader, and this manager's talking to his supervisor saying, hey, I did a generational needs analysis. I know what my employees need from me now, based on their generations. And the manager said, you have 3 people. Why didn't you just ask them what they need from you?
Right.
Why didn't you just talk to them? Well, you have to use something else to try to do that because you're avoiding this conversation, as often happens. Okay. And that's, again, another conversation for another day, but the AI can hopefully help us to get closer to taking the right action, making the right decision, whether it's engaging someone, it's hiring someone, all those kinds of things. So one of the myths that I hear, I'm going to start with Melissa and work my way back for this one. One of the myths that I hear is that AI is dehumanizing. There was actually an article in The Guardian a couple of years ago that said job hunting in the age of AI is grim and dehumanizing, to quote them. And they were just asking people about the experience and things like that. I'd love to hear from you. I would assume that nobody ever feels that way, but I'd love to hear why you feel like that might be incorrect or myth.
Yeah, I think it goes back to those experiences that matter to an employee when the moment they need help, right? And I think, the baby is one of those examples, right? Having a first time, being a first time parent, or dealing with something that's high charged emotion from a death in the family, or I need to take time off for something with my kids. And it's the ways that you can have an experience that I think changes the way that people can actually feel. Right now, when I start to talk about warming hearts and things like that, people are like, we can't get there today, right? We need to make sure we can just get AI to automate. But the reality is, you remember those experiences when you walk into a 5-star hotel and they know your name and they're like, hey, Melissa, we're so excited you're staying here, right? And from a work experience, we need to be doing that and understand our people in ways from that moment that they become a candidate and that first touch with the organization, from that lull from onboarding, right? They sign the offer letter, but then everybody waits to engage with them until they start. How do we start to engage them through that cycle? And so I think what we're starting to see with the data is that giving people efficiency, giving people time off matters, right? Or meaning that time back to become more productive has huge impact, as do those moments where you can engage with somebody in another way and another type of technology that you haven't been able to before in a much more remote or hybrid remote world.
I mentioned some research earlier this week that we just finished on mental health and well-being, because you've mentioned that a couple of times. I just want to tack on really quickly to that we actually asked the workforce in this, not just how we as HR leaders feel, but we asked the workforce, if your company cared about your mental health, if they supported you, what would that mean? What would you do? And those people were much more likely to refer friends to work there because they think their employer truly cares about them. They're more likely to, they said, well, I would work harder. I would care more. I would stay here longer. I would do all these things because for a long time, it has been just a given. We assume if someone showed up in the office and they were smiling, that they were okay, that their family was safe, they were healthy. We can't make those assumptions anymore.
Right.
And so the data are really indicating that people are craving us to do that in some way. And I love that some of the ways that you and the team at Socrates are making that happen. Awesome. Terry, dehumanizing, is it?
I don't think it's dehumanizing. I feel like, again, going back to, I think, companies having conversations with all of you folks this week, I feel like companies are going to skills-based recruiting. We had conversations with folks this week where, they've had requisitions open for, a month, and they weren't even looking at their own internal talent again. So the AI is going to give us the opportunity to automate that process and look into our internal talent pools, our internal talent pipelines that we have where we're sourcing from candidates, and really just make our lives easier. Let's get the menial administrative tasks off the table and give recruiters the opportunity to do what they like, and that's engaging with people.
That's one of the things I shared with you when I talked to you the other day. We did some research this year. Sorry, like everything has research. I'm sorry, that's my love language. But we did some research early this year around that because again, a question I've had for a long time. I keep hearing people say, yeah, but my job. And so we actually asked companies, if you are using automation, if you're using AI, if you're using machine learning, you're using something to automate part of your hiring process, what are you doing with that freed up time? Is it adios to Terry and the rest of the recruiters? Like, what are you doing? And we found that number one, they're spending more time sourcing because we got to find the right people. Number two, they're spending more time communicating with candidates because right now they're getting that hi kind of flyby, but they don't have a real conversation. So we're spending more time conversing with them. And third, they're spending more time building those relationships with their hiring partners, with their stakeholders, with their hiring managers to make sure they truly understand their needs. And instead of having this kind of butting heads moment like it often has, they're looking for ways to build a better bridge between those two. So absolutely, and we're seeing those things. I've heard those anecdotally for so long, like, oh, it's getting rid of the menial stuff. So you can, like, is that really true? And the evidence shows that it actually is. So that's always fun. All right, Teresa.
Yeah, so many myths, right? There's so many myths around AI, machine learning, like you mentioned. And, I do believe there is this perception out there that people believe that it will take over the world, right? It's going to take over our jobs, and it's really here to augment, right? It's here to be an extension of who we are, to help us perform our jobs better and to really give us greater visibility into the people that are driving the business forward. So if we look at it from that perspective, right, it can kind of shift gears and it can help us to really focus in, free up our time so we can focus in on maybe creating new programs for our people or, doing something outside of the organization that's going to bring those interests and talents into the company. So there's a lot of ways that we can take advantage of this for sure.
One of the ways I kind of phrase it, and I want you to respond to this, is if I ask the CFO of this place we're sitting right now, I said, hey, this chair that Teresa's sitting in, how much did you pay for it 20 years ago or 10 years ago? What's the expected life? What would it go for market value today? Like, they could pull that stuff up and tell me that immediately. If I said, hey, that person over there that's in your organization, what do they care about? What is bothering them right now? How can we support them? They kind of throw out their hands. Would you agree? Like, do we need that kind of insight into our people?
Yes, 100%. It's one thing to make decisions in the organization about facts, right? And having the data to make it, but we got to bring the facts and the feelings together to really drive our people forward and really give them a greater experience. Because when we talk about consumerism, one of the biggest things is whether it's recruiting or retaining, we've got to look at those experiences that people are having at the organization, because they're going to give a 5-star or they're going to give a 1-star. And that impacts the reputation and the brand of the organization. It also sends out messages to other people who might want to be joining the organization. So, my favorite thing to say is we've got to take that data insight and marry it with the human insight to be able to drive results and create an experience where our people truly do want to come to work and stay and where they feel valued and that they can trust is the big word here, that the organization is doing everything for them and that they can trust the experience that they're having.
I love that. If you had you can't drop the mic because they don't like when you do
Oh,
that.
I'll drop the mic,
But
okay.
Just drop the mic, okay. All right. So I'm going to take a pause really quick and check. So we had a couple questions come in online. I'm going to throw them out, let you all address those, and then we'll come back. I've got a couple more as well in our remaining time. To those of you out there virtually, please ask questions. If you have questions in the room too, by the way, you're welcome to. This is your chance. So throw a hand up. We'd love to address that with conversation. We got an all-star panel here, as you can tell. So Lizzie on LinkedIn asked, how can AI help organizations recruit and improve diversity in their organization? So I'm going to let the recruit piece fall on you, but then we're going to talk about increasing diversity, increasing how we support diverse individuals for you too as well. All right?
I think it's giving you the opportunity to, source over your local talent pipeline, but also over maybe the job board or digital online sources that you're utilizing. In addition, again, we talked about anonymizing contact information, maybe previous employers, universities, hobbies, interests, so that we're not making these biased decisions or unbiased decisions when we're looking at maybe somebody's profile or resume, and then opening up that information after the fact. So truly doing a skills-based hiring, not based off of maybe where somebody went to school, et cetera, because that's where your hiring manager likes to see people from, or previous companies.
What does that show, The Voice or whatever, where they have them behind a curtain? What is that one? Which one? I don't watch TV, but there's someone, they have someone behind a curtain and they sing, like, okay, now you can see them at the end, right? That kind of thing, where they start to figure out, okay, I like this person, they have the right skills, they have the right abilities, they feel like they match this job. Okay, then we'll find out who they are. But we don't know any of those things before because that helped. Okay, I love that. All right. Melissa, Teresa.
Yeah. I mean, from a diversity perspective on an AI front, I mean, I think a lot of things is there's so many great programs and initiatives that companies offer. And so as somebody's thinking about, or a question that comes up that's top of mind, being able to cross-promote those programs. So for instance, did you know we had this diversity and inclusion program on XYZ, right? Or for women in leadership, right? For a rising star. And then how do you start to think about how do you cross-promote based on the pieces and understanding that data from an AI point of view, and then also being able to say, okay, this can benefit you, right? So let me cross-promote this program we're offering from a diversity point of view, and shining a light to the things, all the places where the organization impacts them from that whole experience based on who they are.
I love that. Well, the first thing I thought of when I thought you were going to answer that question is the way you answered earlier, like, you know what? There are certain populations that might feel more stressed right now, so we're going to make sure they're getting that mental health benefit. But other groups, they really are worried about their finances right now, so we're going to push them this content that we have around educating them on that. Right? So it doesn't matter who you are. There's something probably at all of our companies that serves a certain population, and we can push that to the right person at the right time when they need it, so that they can get whatever support they need instead of, again, waiting for them to do that virtual pass by, like, hey, while I'm here, can I ask you a question? Because that's what always happens. No, get it when you need it.
That's
not at some undefined point in the future where you may never actually ask for it. All right, excellent.
Yeah, I would say throughout the entire experience, right? So when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we got to look at it from the time that we recruit and hire somebody into the organization all the way until the time that they leave the company and everything in between. And we need to look at it with AI to really help us drive decisions around, are we paying our employees fairly, right? What does that look like in the organization? And are we providing them the opportunities to upskill or retrain and develop? When we're not using technology to help with that, right, it's our opinions that come into play, right? Or we may look at a certain group and say, we're not going to promote women in the organization, for an example. So when we start looking at it from an AI perspective, we're looking at it fairly, right, across the entire company. And also when that happens, right, there's connections that can be built with AI with all groups of people. And those connections then really allow us to promote belonging within the organization as well, because that's a huge piece of it. If people aren't feeling like their voices are being heard, or they feel like a certain group of people is being heard over them, right? How much of an environment are we creating that is about belonging?
That's one of the big takeaways that I had from one of our studies, where we looked at how employee surveys were used, things like that. And one of the big takeaways was, if you're not average, if you're not in that 70% of people say X, if you're not in that average bucket, you're not heard. We can't listen to you, we can't serve you, we can't understand what you need, because we just aggregate and roll it up. Because with our limited abilities as humans, our limited calculating abilities, we bucket things because it makes it easy. It's how our brain works. But an algorithm would say, yes, but for women in your engineering team, here's how they feel. Or for your people who are in sales, who are in the Midwest, here's their priority, here's their challenge. And to be able to really break that down and make it very granular, none of us get up saying, I really hope we don't serve you well today. None of us do that. But it allows you to live up to that hope we have as HR leaders, to really serve people well, as recruiting leaders, to really serve people well throughout the processes, the ways we could touch them. Awesome. That was a great question, Lizzie. Thank you so much for that one. Pam's a longtime friend. Hey, Pam, from up in Canada. Good to see you. Pam said, what ways do you think organizations can train their employees and managers on what AI is and how it's used? So AI is this big, crazy topic. We have a bunch of HR and talent leaders and IT leaders and HRS leaders, and I think I've captured all the titles in the room maybe. We have all these leaders here who that is their job, to understand these things. But how do we filter that down to the people that we're serving? Should we, maybe, I don't know, I'm going to make an assumption there. Should we filter that down to them? Would you like to start?
Sure. So, I think one of the most important things when it comes to technology, whether it's AI, machine learning, data analytics, dashboards, the most important thing behind any data science is we got to know what the question is that we're trying to answer, or the problem that we're trying to solve. So once we've identified that, right, maybe it is a headcount issue. Maybe it's that we have people who are not engaged into the workforce. So once we've identified what the question is, or the problem that we're trying to solve, then we can come up with a formula, right, with artificial intelligence to kind of insight that information throughout the organization. And then training them up on that. If we're using artificial intelligence, right, the data is going to provide itself. The data is going to deliver the results, but it needs to be in an easy to digest format so that these leaders can take that information then to make decisions. So we've got to ask the questions on the front end, we've got to understand it, and then we've got to take action. So the action piece is probably the biggest in the training and development of our managers.
So can I challenge you a little bit on something?
Challenge me.
All right. So how's it? Put your hands up. So Pamela's question was, how do we train our people that we're using this? And I kind of adapt that a little bit and say, should we train? Should we care? And you talked about the use cases, taking action, and I completely agree. Those are the outcomes. We should be focusing on what this enables and what this allows us to do. I'm debating internally right now. Do we tell our leaders that we're using this? I guess we could mention it, but I don't want to get bogged down in and here's all the things that it does, and let's flip the hood up and everything else. So it looks like she's got something to say down there. Should we talk about those things, or should we say, you know what, this is the outcome we're delivering to you. That's what matters. If you have questions about that to go deeper, sure. But
yeah, so I mean, from a training point of view, I think it's almost retraining our and hopefully I don't get booed off the stage, but our HR and IT and some of our folks to say, I think end users are craving this. And I don't think there's a need to potentially train them, right? Meaning that you didn't train somebody how to use Amazon, right? They have that experience and it's a positive one. And if you can start asking questions, or if you can be able to have things done efficiently, they're going to get it. The consumer world is so far ahead, it is really far on that journey. And the biggest thing we see with our customers, right, in terms of when they implement this, is it's a lot about getting the concept of focusing so much on system process, right? And taking that notion out. Just because a system has a configuration or a field, that shouldn't be the consumer experience for the employee, right? They don't care. As much as I'd love to say they do, they want to be able to get things done, and they want to do it in a way that's conversational and simple and intuitive. And I think that's the thing that's so beautiful about what AI offers people, is the chance to do it in a way that, regardless of what they're asking, regardless of what they want to do, they can start doing those things from day one when they interface with the technology. So if you can see, I feel a little passionate about
Yes,
it. But,
yes.
so hopefully that helps.
Take a drink, cool yourself
Yeah.
down. I agree though. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, it is that consumer experience that you're talking about, and that is the beauty behind artificial intelligence, is it does serve it up so that you don't have to think about the training. However, from my perspective, you know, I believe that we need to be transparent, that we're introducing this concept into the organization because we're trying to build a culture of trust where we're putting our people first, but the training concept should come naturally, right? It should automatically happen as a result of AI.
And I'm going to adapt it a little bit for you because we're talking about employees already inside.
Yep.
On the candidate side, I know there are some laws, some regulations that actually require certain localities to tell them if you're using AI to screen them. I understand that. But beyond that, should companies be getting into the weeds of how AI works and here's how we're going to vet you and everything else? I mean, some transparency, I think, to Teresa's point, is important, but how much?
I agree. I think some transparency is definitely important, but again, we want to make our teams more efficient. We want people to be happy at the workplace. You know, I personally, you know, we don't want to be bogged down with data entry tasks, things like that, right? We could be spending our time doing more productive activities. So again, I feel like what we're seeing, the trend is that why not take these tasks off the table for these recruiters that can be automated, right? So the transparency should be there, but again, let's adopt, let's get it going and automate those processes, right? To give time back to our recruiters.
I would bet, and all the time you've been in and around recruiting, no one's ever said, hey, how many resumes did you screen this week? No one ever asked you that. They ask you how many people we hired, right? They want to know how many seats you filled. It's not how many did you consider and then not hire.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I'm having this debate a little bit. Like, do we talk about the process or we talk about the result, the outcome, the impact? Because that's ultimately what we're held accountable for as HR leaders. And that's what I'm kind of leaning into there. That's a good question, Pamela. I wish we could spend an hour on that one alone. All right. Any questions in the room before I go on to some of the other ones that I have? All right. Wonderful. Okay. So we know, we've already heard little snippets of it here, that AI has the power to change jobs. We've seen it happen in other industries already. We know it's changing HR on some level and hopefully elevating it is my hope. How does implementing AI change the work that HR leaders are doing, that recruiting leaders are doing? We've talked about, you know, taking some of those tasks off the plate and stuff. What does that then enable though, if that's the case?
Yeah, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier. It really does enable them to free up their time, right? To focus in on perhaps more strategic goals, you know, create groups for employees to be involved in. And, you know, it also gives insight into trends that are happening across the organization. So again, so that you can have that real-time insight to pivot very quickly to make decisions and create an environment that is focused in on people first, right? Always people first. And so that they can, at that point, right, really look at areas that they may have problems in and resolve those conflicts. But the proactive approach of this is what's so exciting about AI, is because when you can look at it and predict what's going to happen into the future, right, which we can't really do that, but give you insight to be able to see those trends that are really happening. Then as an HR professional, you can take that information and prepare the organization, prepare your people before a problem actually escalates. And I think that's one of the biggest areas for HR, right? We want to kind of minimize those escalations and the problems that we have in our workforce. So having that kind of insight really is very powerful.
I can't tell you how many times this week I've talked to someone here that's used the phrase putting out fires. Yeah. Right? And if it's already a fire, it's too late for us to, right? Then it becomes this thing that demands all of our attention, all of our effort, and all those other things have to be put on hold until we get back to that. Awesome. Okay. Terry, any insight into this on how it's changing jobs, what it enables for recruiters, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I agree with you as well. I feel like it's going to bring employee satisfaction to the table as well internally for our organizations when we start automating a lot of these menial tasks that we're all bogged down with, right? So I think we need to look at that in that scenario. And
I always use this metaphor, and I want to hear what's on the bottom of your list.
Yeah.
Okay, I always use this metaphor that every HR leader that I know has a list of things to do. Every recruiting leader has a list of things to do.
Yeah.
If you're in HR, you've got to carry a notebook. It's some kind of unwritten rule. I don't know why, but it is. And so at the top of that are like, I've got to handle these benefits questions, or I've got to take care of posting that rec, or but at the bottom are things that on my list were always like, how do we build a better culture? What does it take to really build a bench strength of leaders to enable us to be proactive, right? Before someone leaves, how do we make sure we're ready for that? What's on the bottom of those lists for recruiting leaders? They're really thinking strategically about what's next and really thinking about how to solve the bigger problems that organizations facing. Any insight into that?
yeah, I think that, you know, organizations are, sorry, maybe I'm going to pass it over to you.
It's all right.
Sorry.
You know, from an employee experience and what's on the list perspective, right? In terms of the strategic initiatives and things like that, those are the things that people want to work on. And, you know, by putting out the fires, there's fires, you know, which stink and they kind of blow up your day, and, you know, you got to get back, and then you're like, I didn't get to this part of my to-do list. But the thing that I think that from an employee experience point of view, where we can really, this is a unique time, especially within HR, is what I would probably say, because employee experience has come front and center. There's so many organizations who've started to change their name and branding, even human resources, to people and culture, right? Or employee experience. And there's employee experience positions now created. This is the opportunity in my mind for, in particular, HR to shine, because they are at the heart of employee experiences and what they bring to the company. And so, in my mind, this kind of puts it front and center with what Teresa was talking about earlier about the data, right? That's one piece, the longitudinal data that you get out of it. But it's also then having an opportunity to actually have some forward thinking as to what's next, right? So does that make sense?
I think it's leaning into whatever's next, whatever's coming, whatever. Instead of it being just always reactive, we get to be a little more proactive about what our future looks like. We always had a meeting January of every year, and it was like, what's our big crazy idea for the year? What are we going to do? You know, if everything works right at the end of the year, what's it going to look like? What are the impacts going to be? How are people going to feel? Right, what are our leaders going to be saying about the HR team, and how are they going to respond to that? Like, we try to visualize those things because nothing ever goes perfectly. I've yet to have that perfect year yet, but it gave us a chance to stop and just think about what are we moving towards, not just what we're going away from. Because when it's always fighting a fire, it's like, I'm going from fire to fire to fire, instead of saying, I am looking forward to this thing, and I'm going to make this thing happen, and every action I take should be leading me in that direction. If it's not, I need to rethink if that's the right action I should be taking today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as far as the to-do list, just one thought here is, you know, data, right? When we look at it, it should not be a separate line item on the to-do list, right? AI should be a part of our to-do list that really is augmenting some of those things that we are trying to check off, right? It should be just a part of it that encompasses some of those tasks on the list.
Tell me the truth. Did you have a list? Did you have a notebook, right, when you worked in HR?
Yes. I've always had a notebook. I still do. I'm not going to lie to you.
Mine's right back there in the back corner. Okay, I want to make sure I wasn't too far off base with that one. Okay, so we have another question come in from our audience online, and I can't see their name, so we'll just run with it. What can we do as HR professionals, in their words, to help applicants navigate an AI recruitment process? How do we reduce the potential for frustration who would prefer the option of interacting with a human? That's a big and hard question. You care if I start?
No, I'll start.
Okay.
I feel like we need to start automating also the processes for candidates applying to jobs as well, right? Why should a candidate have to manually input data, right, when they're filling out an application? Everything I hear right now, like in the conversations this week, is a lot of companies today, I feel like on the corporate side, it's a tedious process. You've got to fill out, maybe a lead form, then you're going through an application, you're going through questionnaires. And I understand there's legalities there that we need, GDPR things that we need to be aware of, but again, let's get the conversions and then use maybe candidate engagement platforms to reach out to those folks so that we are building our talent pipelines We're optimizing our digital online advertising spend when our recruiters out on job boards or social sites, et cetera.
I was talking to a construction company earlier this year, and their application for their jobs was only online. It was not on mobile. It took 17 minutes to complete. You'd upload your resume, then you'd start typing in all the things you just uploaded. And so, like, for those experiences, they said, why are we not getting enough applicants? And I said, I can tell you in about 10 seconds, what the problem is.
Yeah.
Because according to some sources, more than half of job traffic is mobile, things like that. So we're creating an experience that is intentionally, or unintentionally, disregarding half the people who are wanting to come and apply for a job with us. Once they hit that button to apply or whatever else, or it doesn't click, it doesn't work on mobile, and they just bail and go find someone else.
I think it's, what is it, like 80% plus of candidates are applying through a mobile device, right? So let's make that process efficient for them as well. Right?
That same consumerization thing that we've heard a couple times applies possibly even more, because they're not captive yet. We don't have a hold on them yet. We're not paying them yet. So it matters even more so in that candidate experience than it does so in the employee experience. And it's already incredibly important there. Okay. All right. Sorry, I had to come back to the question. So whoever you are asking that question, thank you. Appreciate you. Good question. Okay. We got a question from our good friend George Rogers. I think he's everybody's friend now after this week. And those of you out there on the live stream, you know and love him because he opened it up for us today. So thank you, George. His question is, how does AI, he's the culture guy, so expect this question. How does AI enhance a company's culture or employee morale? How does it fit into that bigger picture? We talked about some little pieces of it, but not the culture piece specifically. So I'd love to hear from some of you. And if there's a way to do it in the hiring process, you're welcome to throw that in there. But I'm going to start with Melissa this time, actually.
Yeah. So I think culture, is a huge, huge piece of what you can, the fabric of how AI can deliver this. So for instance, one of the things we do with our solution, just to kind of contextualize it, is everybody has their own naming convention that's representative of the company in terms of what they call the experience the employees have. So whether, it's something that, the culture associates with. We have a customer, for instance, who used the chemical compound that's on the moon, planted the flag on the moon, and they call it Scarlet. So that has a long standing history with them as a company, and they built all this cultural components around Scarlet and how do we launch that and what this means to the company and building that company pride around that and the persona of the company. We have another customer who's really fond of 80s pop songs, and they named the bot after Mr. Habato, right? But the reason why that was so great is they had a lot of fun and did a lot of multimedia. But what it did is it engaged people to say, this is our pride as a company. And then all the communications became about how do we really weave that fabric into the way we engage with our employees with some sort of technology that will warm their hearts and get them to engage. It has a huge, huge impact.
I love that. I was talking to a head of people in culture yesterday about some of those, how do we weave culture into some of these other things? Because we think about it at certain points and then we disregard other areas like that. We could just roll this out and call it a chatbot and be done with it.
That's right.
Or we can look for a moment to really connect people and make them feel like this is part of the family and like this is the chance for us all to come together on something we believe in and care about as an organization. We make that choice, right? And again, that's a little more the proactive thing. It's not if they're putting out fires, it's too hard to get to those things, but that's a great example. I love that. All right, Terry.
Well, to piggyback off what you said, I think also in speaking to a lot of folks, we're finding that the data inside of your platforms it's not fresh, right? Mm-hmm. So how are you going to engage your internal employees if there's no contact information or you don't have the insights to what they want out of their current career? So again, I think automating that process to make sure that naturally, organically, you're updating information and enriching the information within your applicant tracking system or CRM is going to be critical to, again, engaging them and reaching out.
Yes. The data show people want to move into another job. They want that opportunity to grow. Even if it's not today, they want to know the door's always open to them. The study we did this year showed that 2 out of 3 employees, if you lined up 3 of your people side by side, 2 out of 3 of them have quit a job at some point in their career because they didn't have the opportunity to grow and develop. And not only that, 88% of them said, I would have stayed if I had something ahead. If they had helped me cast a vision for what my next step was in my career, I would have been glad to stick around. But because they didn't do that, I'm out. It's a big decision. People don't just like jump out for fun. They leave when they feel like there's no other option. It's their last choice. All right. Good point. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I think, a big piece of building this culture is hearing the voice, right? We've talked about this, hearing the voice of all of our employees. And what oftentimes I hear from organizations is, our frontline workers are the ones that need their voices heard, right? Because this is the challenge, this is the problem, and we focus on the problem so much that we're not hearing the voice across the entire organization. And so, people want to feel valued. I want to feel valued. You want to feel valued, all of us, right? And if we feel that somebody else is getting that preferential treatment, right, or a group of people, then we leave. And then we go through the whole recruiting process all over again. So hearing the voice of every employee so that they feel valued, then we can start looking at the data, right? We can start looking at the insights and what's important to them, how they're feeling, their trends, their goals, their desires, their passions, and we can build that culture where they can feel as though the trust factor comes into play again, right? That they can trust us, and we can take that information and start implementing it into our culture. So we're building out passions. What are people passionate about? Maybe it's an organization or a group that they want to start. Maybe it's taking pictures of their family and sharing that. Maybe it's passing around recipes. It is the holidays. So we can take that data insight, right, about not only what's important to work, but who they are at the core of the being, the whole person, and incorporate that and create your culture based on those foundations.
When we say bring your best self to work, we don't say bring your best work self to work.
Right.
We say bring your best
bring your
self.
whole self, your best self. Just bring yourself.
Yes, whatever
right?
you got, bring it with you. We're all messy. We're human.
That's
how
right.
That's how it is. We agreed to that when we signed on in the HR space. Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes left. I'm going to go back through kind of rapid fire, and then we'll wrap up. We'll start with you, Teresa. Any advice? What's parting wisdom, insight would you give to an HR leader out there who's thinking about, okay, Mythbusted, I'm on board, this AI stuff matters, I believe in it. What should I do next? How should I go about it? Any insight?
Just a couple of things come to mind, right? I mean, have a conversation with your stakeholders, right? Find out what's important to the organization. You may identify one key area to start out with and focus in on that. The next thing is to listen to the people, right? Put the people first, listen to the people, then take the data to really understand. But again, you got to go back to data. We're not all data scientists here, but we got to go back to the data and identify what is the question we're trying to answer or the problem we're trying to solve. So listen, understand, and put a plan proactively on what you're going to do to take action on that.
Excellent. It's like a master class right there in change management.
Masterclass.
Excellent. All right, Terry.
Yeah, I would just say I think it's time to adopt, right? It's time to adopt AI so that we can solve a lot of these challenges that our teams are experiencing in the workplace, right? It's time to jump on board. I think that, like you said, it's the data. I challenge you guys to go out and look at, your replies that you've received through all of your digital online sources, and then look at what's in your actual applicant tracking system today. I can almost guarantee there's going to be a huge disparity in the numbers there, right? So again, just automating a lot of these processes to make sure that we're capturing the talent that we spent money on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think like HR people aren't as competitive with each other as recruiters are feeling competitive.
Yeah.
And so like the lever I always pull is, hey, they're going to do it if you don't.
Yeah.
All right, someone's going to beat you to that candidate that you really want because they're using tools to find them faster, to communicate with them faster, to do all those kinds of things. Excellent. All right, Melissa.
I would say have some conversations, right? Have some conversations with your team outside of the domain that you work in, right? Meaning end users, people who are everyday employees, and not in a survey fashion, in the sense of, because that is, to your point, frustrated, bad day, good day. Have the conversations and get the feedback. Say, what do you love about the systems you work with today? And what do you hate? Where can we make your lives easier? And if you actually take the time, book a couple of those sessions, use the user advisory groups that they have at big companies and say, what is top of mind for you? I guarantee you the insight you'll get from that 30-minute call will be incredibly valuable for you in terms of discerning what really the workforce needs and how the places we can actually then start to leverage this type of technology to help them.
That rich insight that you get from those kind of conversations, again, even doing a good survey, it's hard to get that level of detail to really understand what someone is bothered by and how and when they use it and why they use it. And like going through this, you don't have to do it for every employee, right? But to do it with a certain sample from every group allows you to really understand what those people need. Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Teresa. You've all been incredibly wonderful. Thank you to our online audience. We appreciate you for hanging with us for the great questions. For those of you that asked one, we answered it here on stage, or they answered it here on stage. I'll make sure we're getting a book out to all of you as a thank you for asking questions. Thank you to our wonderful audience here. We appreciate all of you. This is our chance to do that. George, pass it back to you, my friends. You finish that one up. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks.
You are dismissed. Thank you.
Wow, that was incredible. I appreciate the panel once again. I got so much out of that, and I know we had a good chat going in the comments. Great questions. We appreciate you being a part of this. Some things that really stuck out to me, and I wanted to just discuss real quick as we wrap up. Teresa in the beginning, she said, how are people feeling? And that resonates because I think a lot of the time when we think about AI, and that was the first myth busting, right? Is that AI takes out relationship, it takes out the connection of how our team feels. And I think it's different. And she really explained it very well. It is important for us to have that authentic relationship to where we are connected with our team. We know how they feel, what are they thinking, and how that really impacts the culture and the morale of the team. Another thing that really stuck out with me, and this word was thrown out a lot with the panel, and it's the T word, right? Trust. Trust is the key that keeps things moving, right? If the team cannot trust what we are doing, how we are doing, and where we're going with this, is very difficult. And so it's important that with AI and with the team that we are building trust. The last thing that really stuck out with me is really AI provides an opportunity to go from employee engagement to employee fulfillment. And I believe that is huge, right? It goes from really, authentic recognition to really removing that empty fulfillment where we give gift cards or we give a day off or whatnot, but really understanding what is the true love language, what really makes a person feel connected. For so many different people, we got different characteristics, right? So for me, you can give me, as the people know, you can give me a pair of shoes and I am excited, right? But somebody may need more time. Somebody may just want to spend time with their leader because they want to grow and elevate and they want to be able to spend time to really be encouraged and also to really get constructive criticism. And so really finding out, what does George want? What does Pamela want? What do we want to get out of this? AI really provides that data, as Ben likes to talk about in the research. It really gives you that true, this is what's needed. This is what helps move the needle. And so I'm excited about that. And I'm excited for this panel. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, to our great panel, once again, to all our lovely sponsors here at HR Tech Connect, we want to say thank you for joining us today. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend.